Do you remember when breakfast meant something cooked in cast iron over a wood stove? Before drive-thrus and microwaves changed everything, mountain folks started their days with hearty meals that could fuel a full day of hard work. Today we're exploring 25 traditional hillbilly breakfasts that have all but disappeared from modern tables. Let's start with chocolate gravy and biscuits. This sweet morning treat from the Ozarks and Appalachian regions turned breakfast into dessert long before anyone thought of chicken and waffles. Made from cocoa powder, sugar, flour, and milk, this rich gravy was stirred together in a cast iron skillet until thick and glossy. Mountain families would ladle it generously over hot, flaky biscuits fresh from the oven. The tradition started in the early 1900s when cocoa became affordable enough for special occasions. Kids would beg their grandmothers to make it on cold Saturday mornings. Some families added a pat of butter for extra richness, while others preferred a splash of vanilla. By the 1970s, as health consciousness grew and traditional cooking declined, chocolate gravy became increasingly rare. Today, only a handful of old-timey restaurants still serve this sweet memory of simpler times. Redeye gravy ham biscuits. If you've never had Redeye gravy, you've missed one of the South's most ingenious creations. This thin, coffee-infused gravy originated when resourceful cooks deglazed ham drippings with leftover coffee. The name came from the red circle that formed when the coffee hit the grease. Country ham, salt-cured and aged for months, would be sliced thin and fried until the edges curled. Then came the magic. A splash of strong black coffee into the hot pan, creating a sauce that was equal parts salty, smoky, and slightly bitter. Poured over split biscuits with the ham tucked inside, it made a breakfast that could sustain a farmer through morning chores. Some added a touch of brown sugar to balance the bitterness. The practice dates back to Andrew Jackson's era in the 1830s. As country hams became harder to find and coffee makers replaced percolators, this historic breakfast gravy nearly vanished from American tables. Tomato gravy on biscuits. Long before marinara sauce conquered America, mountain cooks were making tomato gravy for breakfast. This tangy creation started with bacon drippings. Nothing was wasted in a hillbilly kitchen. Flour was stirred into the hot fat to make a roux. Then home-canned tomatoes were added with their juice. The mixture bubbled and thickened while the cook seasoned it with salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of sugar to cut the acidity. Fresh tomatoes worked in summer, but canned ones made this a year-round staple. The result was a pink-orange gravy that looked unusual but tasted incredible over hot biscuits. Some families crumbled leftover bacon into the gravy for extra flavor. This dish was especially popular during the Depression when a jar of tomatoes could stretch a meal. The tradition was strongest in Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Modern breakfast habits and the rise of instant foods pushed tomato gravy into obscurity by the 1980s. Bulldog gravy with biscuits. When times got tough in Appalachia, cooks got creative with bulldog gravy, a meatless version that could feed a crowd on pennies. Also called poor do or poverty gravy, it contained just flour, grease, water or milk, salt, and pepper. The name supposedly came from it being dog rough or tough times food. Despite its humble ingredients, skilled cooks could make it taste rich and satisfying. The secret was browning the flour carefully in bacon drippings or lard until nutty and golden. Then liquid was whisked in gradually to prevent lumps. Some added an onion to the grease for flavor, removing it before making the roux. During the Great Depression, this gravy kept countless families fed when meat was a luxury. Mothers would make extra biscuits, knowing the gravy could make them into a filling meal. The tradition continued through the 1960s in poor mountain communities. Today's abundance makes bulldog gravy seem like deprivation, but it represents the resourcefulness of our ancestors. Cornmeal gravy and biscuits. Before wheat flour was common in the mountains, Cornmeal gravy ruled breakfast tables. This early version of sawmill gravy used stone-ground cornmeal as a thickener, creating a slightly gritty texture that mountain folks loved. Bacon or sausage drippings formed the base, with cornmeal stirred in slowly to prevent lumping. The gravy cooked until thick and creamy, with milk or cream added for richness. The corn flavor added a subtle sweetness that paired perfectly with salty meat drippings. Some cooks added crumbled sausage or bacon back into the finished gravy. This was especially popular in areas where grist mills were more common than wheat flour mills. The yellow-tinged gravy looked different from white sawmill gravy, but tasted just as satisfying over hot biscuits. Old-timers swore it stuck to your ribs better than flour gravy. As commercial white flour became cheaper and more available after World War II, cornmeal gravy gradually disappeared from most kitchens. Sorghum, long sweetening on biscuits. In mountain hollows, where sugar was scarce and expensive, sorghum syrup provided the sweetness for countless breakfasts. Called long sweetening to distinguish it from granulated short sweetening. This dark, molasses-like syrup came from pressing sorghum canes. Families would save their best biscuits for sorghum, splitting them open while hot and adding a pat of butter before drizzling the amber syrup into every crevice. The combination of flaky biscuit, melting butter, and earthy sweet sorghum created a flavor that store-bought pancake syrup could never match. Making sorghum was a community event each fall, with neighbors gathering at the mill to help process the cane. A family's yearly supply would be stored in jugs and used sparingly. Some mixed sorghum with butter to make sorghum butter for easier spreading. Children learned to wipe their plates clean with the last bite of biscuit. As cheap corn syrup flooded the market in the 1960s, traditional sorghum production nearly ceased. Cornbread and milk. Nothing showed the frugality of hillbilly cooking quite like crumble-in. Yesterday's leftover cornbread crumbled into a bowl of cold milk. This simple dish turned potential waste into a satisfying breakfast. The cornbread, ideally a day or two old, would be broken into bite-sized pieces in a bowl or glass. Cold buttermilk was the traditional choice, its tanginess complementing the corn sweetness, though sweet milk worked too. Eaten with a spoon like cereal, it provided a quick, filling start to the day. Some folks added a drizzle of sorghum or honey for extra sweetness. Others preferred it with green onions for a savory version. The practice was so common that many families baked extra cornbread specifically for morning crumble-in. During summer, the cold milk made it refreshing in homes without refrigeration. This tradition lasted well into the 1970s in rural areas. Today's abundance of commercial cereals made this economical breakfast obsolete, though some Southerners still crave it for comfort. Fried cornmeal mush. Before instant oatmeal conquered America's breakfast tables, fried mush was the hot cereal of choice in Appalachian homes. The process started the night before, cooking cornmeal with water and salt until thick as concrete, then pouring it into a loaf pan to chill. Come morning, the firm mush was sliced like bread and fried in bacon grease or lard until golden and crispy outside while creamy inside. The contrast of textures made it irresistible. Some families served it with sorghum syrup or maple syrup like pancakes. Others treated it as a meat substitute, serving it alongside eggs and bacon. The thrifty could stretch it further by adding leftover meat scraps to the mush before chilling. This filling breakfast could sustain hard-working folks until the midday meal. Pennsylvania Dutch called it scrapple when meat was added. The tradition dated back to colonial times but faded as convenience foods took over. By the 1980s, few young cooks knew how to make proper fried mush. Buckwheat cakes. In the mountains of West Virginia and western Maryland, buckwheat cakes were the pancake of choice for generations. These weren't your fluffy modern pancakes. They were thin, tangy, and slightly sour from overnight fermentation. The batter started with buckwheat flour, water, and a bit of saved batter from the last batch as a starter, similar to sourdough. Left on the back of the stove overnight, wild yeasts would work their magic. Morning brought thin, lacy cakes with a distinctive, earthy flavor that married perfectly with sausage and molasses. The first batch was always for the cook to test and adjust. The batter. Some families kept their starter going for decades, passing it down like an heirloom. The cakes cooked quickly on a hot griddle, bubbling and browning in seconds. Fresh churned butter melted into the stack, while sorghum or maple syrup crowned the top. As commercial pancake mixes appeared in the 1950s, the art of buckwheat cake making nearly disappeared. Which of these forgotten breakfasts do you remember from your childhood? Cathead biscuits. These oversized drop biscuits got their name from being as big as a cat's head, and they were built for serious eating. Unlike rolled and cut biscuits, catheads were made by dropping huge spoonfuls of wet dough directly onto the baking sheet. The result was a rustic, craggy-topped biscuit with plenty of nooks for catching gravy. A single cathead could be a meal in itself when split and loaded with sausage gravy or ham. The extra wet dough created a tender, fluffy interior that stayed moist even as leftovers. Mountain cooks made them when time was short, no rolling pin or biscuit cutter needed. Some added extra lard or butter to make them even richer. The irregular shape meant every biscuit was unique, with crispy peaks and soft valleys. They were perfect for sopping up every drop of Redeye gravy or egg yolk. Restaurants sometimes called them angel biscuits when yeast was added. Modern portion control and neat presentation pushed these giants off most menus by the 1990s. Salt-rising bread toast. If you've never smelled salt-rising bread baking, you've missed one of Appalachia's most polarizing aromas. This yeast-free bread relied on wild bacteria for leavening, creating a distinctive cheese-like smell that people either loved or hated. The starter began with cornmeal, milk, and salt, kept warm overnight, until foamy and pungent. Making it required skill and perfect temperatures. Too cool, and it wouldn't rise. Too hot, and it died. The resulting bread had a dense, moist crumb and complex flavor unlike any other. Sliced thick and toasted in a skillet with butter, it made a substantial breakfast base. Some topped it with apple butter or jam, while others preferred it plain to appreciate the unique taste. The bread stayed fresh longer than yeast breads, important in homes without refrigeration. Bakers guarded their techniques carefully, as each kitchen's wild bacteria created slightly different flavors. Commercial yeast and modern baking methods nearly eliminated this ancient art by the 1970s. Liver mush with eggs and grits. Western North Carolina's answer to scrapple, liver mush combined pork liver, head meat, and cornmeal into a firm loaf that became a breakfast staple. Sliced thick and fried until crispy outside, it delivered a rich, savory punch that complemented scrambled eggs and creamy grits perfectly. The tradition started with German settlers who brought similar recipes from the Old Country. Each small town had its own liver mush maker with a secret spice blend. Some liked it mild, others added red pepper for heat. The cornmeal gave it structure and stretched the meat further, important when feeding large families. Friday night meant slicing Saturday's breakfast from the fresh loaf. The smell of liver mush frying could wake the whole house. Some ate it on biscuits like a sandwich, others crumbled it into their grits. Health concerns about organ meats and changing tastes pushed liver mush to the margins. Today, only a few traditional producers keep this regional breakfast meat alive in the Piedmont region. Fried bologna and egg sandwich. Before gourmet breakfast sandwiches, mountain folks were stacking fried bologna and eggs between white bread or biscuits. This wasn't thin deli bologna. We're talking thick-cut tubes from the country store, sliced half an inch thick. The key was scoring the edges so it wouldn't cup up in the skillet. Fried until the edges were crispy and the center was hot, it developed a caramelized crust. A fried egg with a runny yolk went on top, maybe a slice of American cheese, all between toasted white bread or inside a warm biscuit. Some added mustard or mayo, others liked it plain. The combination of salty meat, rich egg yolk, and soft bread created the perfect handheld breakfast. Gas station stores across Appalachia sold them wrapped in wax paper. Factory workers grabbed them on the way to early shifts. As fast food chains expanded in the 1980s, homemade bologna and egg sandwiches became less common. Fried hominy with bacon and eggs. Long before grits became the standard, whole kernel hominy provided the starch for mountain breakfasts. These large, puffy corn kernels had been treated with lye to remove the hulls, creating a unique texture and flavor. Drained from the jar and fried in bacon grease with chopped onions, hominy developed crispy edges while staying tender inside. The bacon grease was crucial. It added smoky flavor that plain oil couldn't match. Some cooks added crumbled bacon back in, others kept it simple. Served alongside eggs and bacon, fried hominy was filling and economical. A jar could stretch to feed a large family when times were tight. The alkaline treatment that created hominy also added calcium and made nutrients more available. Some families grew and processed their own hominy, a labor-intensive process that took days. As instant grits became widely available and food processing moved away from homes, fried hominy largely disappeared from breakfast tables by the 1970s. Among these 25 traditional breakfasts, which one surprised you the most? Hoe cakes. These simple cornmeal pancakes got their name from being cooked on hoe blades over open fires, though by the 20th century, cast iron griddles had taken over. The batter was basic, just cornmeal, salt, and water, maybe an egg if times were good. Thin as crepes and crispy around the edges, hoe cakes were the everyday pancake of the rural South. Some cooks added buttermilk for tang, others stuck with water for economy. The key was getting the griddle hot enough to create a crispy crust while keeping the inside tender. Small, palm-sized cakes cooked quickly and could be stacked high. Butter and syrup were luxuries. Many ate them plain or with a drizzle of sorghum. They paired perfectly with fried fish or salt pork. Children learned to flip them early, practicing on the back porch. Unlike wheat pancakes that required expensive flour, hoe cakes used affordable cornmeal available from local mills. Modern pancake mixes pushed these heritage cakes to near extinction. Hot water cornbread. This emergency bread showed the ingenuity of cooks who could make something from almost nothing. Unlike regular cornbread that required eggs and milk, hot water cornbread needed just cornmeal, salt, and boiling water. The boiling water partially cooked the cornmeal, creating a mixture that could be shaped by hand. Formed into small patties and fried in hot oil, they developed a crunchy exterior and creamy interior. The texture was completely different from baked cornbread, denser and more satisfying. Some cooks added a touch of sugar, others included finely diced onions. The hand shaping meant no two were exactly alike, with crispy, thin edges prized by children. These could be made quickly when unexpected company arrived or when supplies ran low. Served hot from the skillet, they needed no butter or topping. The simplicity meant even young cooks could master them. As prosperity increased and ingredients became plentiful, this survival food faded from regular rotation. Fried apples with biscuits. When autumn brought bushels of apples to mountain homesteads, fried apples became a breakfast staple that lasted through winter. Thick slices of tart apples went into a cast iron skillet with butter, cinnamon, and brown sugar or sorghum. Cooked until tender but not mushy, they created their own cinnamon-sweet syrup. The smell could draw sleepy children from bed faster than any alarm clock. Some families used bacon grease instead of butter for a sweet-savory combination that sounds strange but tasted amazing. These weren't dessert. They were a side dish like hash browns, served alongside eggs and meat. The natural pectin in the apples thickened the syrup perfectly. Mixed varieties created complex flavors. Tart Granny Smiths with sweet red delicious. Spooned over split biscuits, they made a complete meal. Home canning kept the tradition alive year-round. As fresh fruit became available year-round in supermarkets, the seasonal ritual of fall apple frying gradually ended. Fried apple hand pies. Before toaster pastries existed, mountain cooks made portable breakfast sweets from dried apples and leftover biscuit dough. These fried pies, or apple jacks, started with dried apples, simmered until soft, then mashed with sugar and spices. The filling was enclosed in rounds of dough, edges crimped tight, then deep-fried until golden. The result was a crispy shell holding molten apple filling, dangerous to eat too quickly, but impossible to resist. Unlike baked pies that required an oven, these cooked quickly in a pot of hot lard on the stove. Wrapped in brown paper, they traveled well in lunch pails and coat pockets. Some families had special crimping patterns that identified the cook. The dried apples concentrated the flavor, making them sweeter than fresh apple pies. Summer might bring peach or blackberry versions, but apple remained king. Commercial snack foods and concerns about deep frying pushed these handheld treasures toward extinction by the 1980s. Grits with Redeye gravy. While most folks sweetened or buttered their grits, mountain cooks discovered that Redeye gravy transformed humble hominy grits into something special. The bitter coffee notes in the gravy played against the mild corn flavor of the grits, creating an unexpectedly harmonious combination. Plain grits were cooked thick and creamy. Then a depression was made in the center to hold the thin gravy. The first spoonful mixed gravy and grits together was revelation, salty, slightly bitter, and deeply satisfying. Some added crumbled bacon or country ham to the bowl. This wasn't a dish for those who liked sweet breakfasts. It was serious fuel for serious work. The combination provided complex flavors without expensive ingredients. Old-timers claimed it could cure a hangover or wake the dead. The ritual of making both components perfectly took practice and patience. As instant grits replaced slow-cooked varieties and coffee makers eliminated percolator dregs, this classic combination nearly vanished from Southern tables. Clabber with cornbread or molasses. Before refrigeration, milk that soured wasn't thrown away. It became clabber, a thick yogurt-like food that mountain folks ate for breakfast. The natural bacteria in raw milk would thicken it into curds and whey if left at room temperature. Unlike buttermilk, which was churned, clabber formed naturally. Eaten from bowls like cottage cheese, it had a tangy, slightly fizzy quality. Crumbled cornbread stirred in added substance and sweetness. A drizzle of sorghum or molasses on top balanced the sourness perfectly. Some preferred it with preserves or fresh berries when available. The probiotics in clabber aided digestion, though nobody called them that back then. Making good clabber required the right temperature and timing. Too warm, and it separated. Too cool, and it wouldn't set. Each family's clabber tasted different depending on their cows and kitchen conditions. Pasteurization laws and refrigeration ended this ancient practice by the 1960s in most areas. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane, exploring these 25 forgotten breakfast traditions. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe.